Well, good morning, Sana. Such a pleasure to have you with us today. I mean, Sana Mir needs absolutely no introduction, so I'm going to skip that part. But I'm so delighted to welcome you to the Girls Summit. And also, I was just thinking, we first spoke years ago when we invited you to this bank panel to discuss diversity and to have, young voices kind of into the forum. And it's been every time I think about the time we speak or we interact, मुझे ख्याल आता है that it's just you come across as so real, so inspiring, and just so unapologetic in many ways, which is quite the exception rather than the rule. So I couldn't think of a better fit to have someone instead of you at this forum to talk about girls, to talk about women. So a very warm welcome, Sana, and thank you for making time to do this because I know the T20 is just ahead of us and you've got a chock-a-block schedule, but thank you for carving out space to do this. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sabah. It's been a pleasure being here, and thanks for the invite. And I'm more than happy to share my voice and my experience with the Girls Summit and all the girls who will be listening to it, and the participants throughout the world in different countries. So thank you so much for a very, very generous introduction.
Oh, absolutely, and you deserve every bit of it and more. Sana, before we delve into this most beautiful and soul-stirring journey of yours, which you're so right. I mean, you've got fans across the world and people will be listening to this. I want to start with a slight sidestepped tangential question. We're living in a time where it's become very sort of fashionable to talk Pakistan down, and I see social media kind of ablaze with that. Something or the other is always a breaking news. There's always some kind of business of fear being peddled when it comes to Pakistan. And when I think about Sana Mir, the previous captain of the Pakistan women's cricket team, I'm just thinking you're someone who's represented this nation, at a global level in so many countries on so many prestigious platforms, just, brought back so much joy and fame for this country and for all of us who belong to Pakistan. You've worn the uniform, with the symbols and all of that. I want to start with asking you, what does Pakistan mean to you? When I say that word, when you think about home in a sense, you've also lived in different parts of Pakistan. What does this place and this word evoke in your mind when you hear it?
Yeah, I think you said it. It just feels home to me. Something a place where I belong. And yeah, I mean, Pakistan is exceptional in its own ways. The number one would be resilience as a country and as people. We have been through a lot. We keep going through a lot. So yeah, I mean, Pakistan is home. The first thing that comes to my mind, and but surprisingly, there is not one city that I can call home because I've lived. My father was in the military, and we kept changing cities, and every city has given me some really fond memories. And I've got friends all over Pakistan. I've got homes for with these friends, or playgrounds where whenever I feel like that's home. But yes, Pakistan has its complexities, like any other country in the world. And there are things that we need to work on, and that is also now, I think, in my head, part of patriotism, about talking about these things in a sensitive way, not like you said, that we keep bashing the people or the country, but yes, talking about things that need to improve, talking about issues that affect this country and the people. But yeah, it's home to me, and I mean, it's still my favorite country. I've traveled all around the world, but the hospitality, especially having family and friends around, makes it home for you. So all these things, the food, the otherwise, I mean, the overall culture sometimes also you start missing when you're outside Pakistan. So yeah, I mean, it's home to me.
Yeah, no, thanks. And and that's beautiful the way you put it, to say, it's not as if we shouldn't be highlighting what's not going okay. And I think that's a really intelligent way of thinking about it, because often we feel like we're either seeing it through a very rose-colored lens that, oh no, let's not say anything negative, or we're either on the other polarized extreme. And that's a very middle of the road path, and I love that. And of course, yeah, you're so right, all the things you've mentioned. So now I want to now obviously get into, the journey, and I want to almost ask you to get into a time capsule, and I want to back up a little bit and say, let's go back to the growing up years, let's go back to childhood. Let's start right there, which I'm sure, your fans and audiences around the world would be curious to know about. What was growing up like? What were some of those really defining influences, whether it was home, whether it was school? What was the immediate environment like growing up?
I think the first thing I'm extremely blessed to have is the kind of parents I have. The overall equality and stability in the house, and leadership of my father, and the nurturing of my mother. I think the more I travel around the world, the more I realize that even if I can thank God for this one thing, I won't be able to do that, because I've seen my colleagues or friends with broken homes. It's not easy. So the first thing I think I was very blessed to have was a stable family, where equality was a given, whether you are a girl or a boy. So in that sense, we were treated equally, whether it was um, anything, education or rights of mobility, things like that, simple things like that. So there was equality. And then I was surrounded by very strong women in their own ways, not necessarily professional women, but even homemakers who were very strong with what they believe they wanted to do, and what they believe life should be for a woman. So they were making their own choices. Like my grandmother, my father's mother, I was quite close to her while growing up, and I saw her. She was very kind and very just, to my mother, to all her daughter-in-laws, as you say. So I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of camaraderie between women I also saw as a child, where women were secure with each other and they were happy with each other. So I think that really influenced me and my character. And then I think leadership, I have to say, it's from it sounds funny because we talk about women empowerment and feminism and all that, and my leadership, most of it has been influenced by the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the sense that he talked about very simple rules, that don't do to others what you don't want to do to yourself, and respect your seniors, be kind to your juniors. So I think these two quotes were very important for me throughout my leadership, that I try to choose for others what I would choose for myself in that particular situation. So if I'm dropping someone from the team, they are not playing, so how would I like to be told or communicated, and how I would like to be treated with respect while I might not be good enough in that moment. So I think all these things really influenced my own leadership, that I really wanted to do. And then another teaching about, if you want to criticize someone, do it in private, and if you want to praise someone, do it in public. So small little things, but they go a long way in building teams and building in developing people with low confidence and low self-esteem. And generally, women in Pakistan, that is a reality, that young girls do not have that given confidence that some of the other societies might have, because the way they have been raised. So you have to, it's a very delicate process of giving them confidence, letting them know what they need to improve, but not damaging their confidence. So it was a quite a delicate process, but yeah, I mean, that's how I think my leadership was influenced.
That is so lovely, Sana, and especially what you said about growing up and seeing strong women. And I love the fact that you highlighted how it was not necessarily within this mold, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. where we tend to think of empowerment and feminism in this very loud kind of way. And, you've got to be out on a street somewhere holding a placard to be heard. And yet here you're talking about women who necessarily weren't like financially independent or like kind of going out of the house to work, but yet were powerful and compelling, and their voice mattered, and they carved their own path. But also the point on criticizing in private, that
Yeah.
is something that, I mean, I could definitely hear, and I'm sure everybody listening in would definitely value that and benefit from that. So no, thank you so much. Sana, I'm going to ask you next, who were some of the, very typical question, I bet you're tired of answering it, but growing up, what were some of the sporting influences, like were men, women, whoever, irrespective of gender, who sort of left a mark? And I suppose even to date, who do you kind of look up to?
Yeah, so I think my first cricketing ideal and hero has to be Jonty Rhodes from South Africa. I used to love the way he used to field and give his 100% on the field. In bowling, it was Waqar Younis. I started off as a fast bowler, so wanted to just do the action, copy his own action.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's why I got injured also, because I was trying to copy his action. And then in leadership at that point, of course, Imran Khan. I was a 80s kid, so 92 World Cup. So that was quite an influence. And then Saqlain Mushtaq as an off spinner, MS Dhoni. Now in the current cricketing world, I think he has been a phenomenal leader. Now in the present times, I'm really fond of Williamson, Kane Williamson from New Zealand. And in the women, while I was growing up, I never had any cricketing role model from the female cricket, because I never knew it existed at that point, even though it was there, but we never saw it. So I think Steffi Graf and Martina Hingis. Steffi Graf was like very the initial tennis player that I really started following, and then Martina came in and I started following her also. So yeah, I mean, at that point, I think all I remember in female athletes that we used to see on TV was tennis. So
Yeah.
those were the influences. Yeah.
I find that so interesting, Sana, because you're right. It's not as if cricket wasn't being played by women, but yet there was this silence and invisibility around it, which,
Yes.
might I say, with your coming on, has changed so much that today, quite honestly, and of course you know this, but when your name gets taken somewhere, no one, and that's why I skipped the introduction, because obviously everybody knows who that is. And I feel that in itself is not something we can take for granted. That's quite a milestone in itself to kind of try and move the needle towards more visibility for women in cricket. So yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's funny you say Jonty Rhodes, because as just a lay audience, we were such fans. And I remember my sister had like a big poster up and those catches of his, and
Yeah,
it was
and the
a
run
big,
out, and the famous run out of Inzamam Haq
yes, yes.
diving into the wicket. Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
were really relatable names. Um, Sana, I want to, before we talk a little more about sort of women and the girl child, it's kind of, I was unsure whether I really want to ask this, but it feels kind of inauthentic not to. Yet I don't want to politicize the conversation too much. But I guess where I'm going with this question is that today we see something like sports even deeply politicized to a large extent. It's so much more than kind of the people on the field and what interactions happen there. And I say this very much, let me anchor this question in what happened with the New Zealand tour recently. And I say this because, especially when I think about women in South Asia in the sporting arena, there's enough to pull them back already. It's
Yeah.
something that is still gradually moving. And of course it is moving. So I'm not denying that. But yet when you see things like this happening, it becomes like a real setback, for the people involved, but also for the nation, also for aspiring athletes and sports people. I mean, I guess I'm curious to know your reactions to this and how you feel we can move on from something like this without getting too jaded and too demoralized about something like this. In particular, I know it wasn't the girls' team, but of course there are female sports people looking on, and kind of taking a cue from this. What do you make of it, and what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it was New Zealand's men team was only touring, but it was England women's team also giving a full tour to Pakistan, which was also cancelled. So
Right.
that might not have made it to the news because their press conference did not include the women's team notification. But our women's team, who was not playing for the last 7 months, was also waiting and looking forward to that tour. And as you said very correctly, that South Asian women already had to face so much, and then when these opportunities are taken away. So I'm all for not having political influences in sport. I remember in 2013 when the World Cup was being held in India, and our team was under a lot of pressure because we were not allowed to play in Mumbai.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because of the Indian, there were elements where they did not want the Pakistan team to come. We
Mm.
still went and played in Cuttack. A whole set place was set up for our matches, and we had to go and live in a stadium, and we still played. And that's the kind of commitment Pakistan have shown to the game of cricket. And then last year, the Pakistan team went to England, and they when there were no vaccines, and the English summer was really affected by teams not coming there, and still the Pakistan team went. So definitely it has left a bad taste for us, all of us. But we are a resilient country, and we are going to get back from it. There is no, I have no doubt in terms of that, because the thing is, these things are not dependent on one or two countries. I mean, it's a big sport. Cricket is a global game, and if a couple of countries will say no, a few will say yes. Just now,
Yeah.
before logging in, I saw a news. It's still to be very authentically confirmed, but it's 80-90% confirmed that the West Indies women team is touring Pakistan in November. So
Wow.
there will be teams who will um, cross that political thing and come. We still have commentators from around the world, even doing Mike Haseman stayed over for the domestic season. So there are people who make sure that sports is not politicized, but unfortunately there are people who think that they can use this to for whatever reasons they think might be justified. But as a sports person, as someone who went into Cuttack in 2017 and played there, I do feel that there are things that are bigger than what our own belief system at time would be. So, I mean, sending a team to Pakistan at this point would have been such a big thing for the nation, because we were looking for an England tour and all that, and the security was superb.
Yeah.
We just had finished the national T20 in Pindi and Lahore. So, I mean, yeah, I totally agree that sports should be kept away from politics. I'm a firm believer of that. Just like music and arts and all these things transcend borders, the sports is one of those things. But it's unfortunate that it's being used like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I am so with you, because I saw even online that there were players from across the world who did extend support, and who
Yes.
did kind of say that they've toured Pakistan previously and security has been absolutely par excellence. And so I think that's a great way of looking at it,
I
instead
mean,
of completely, yeah.
you must remember what happened in New Zealand a couple of years ago in the mosque. And then a couple of months later, Pakistan visited. Bangladesh players were about to go into that mosque to pray. They were on their way when that incident happened, and still they completed the tour.
Gosh,
So, I
yes.
mean, things like that. So there are teams that do not bring politics into sport, and I think we have those good examples also, and we have these examples also, and it's up to us what examples we want to set and what examples we want to follow.
Sure, sure. No, absolutely. Sana, obviously this is the Girls Summit, and so girls and women are very front and center in this conversation. And as I think about your journey, like I was saying, I've known you all of these years now, and you're obviously known across the globe. And yet I find this very interesting aspect to your journey of how, on the one hand, clearly Sana Mir's journey is the road less taken. You know, it signals kind of carving her own voice and path in what is hard to deny is a male dominated realm, you know, at least in South Asia to a large extent, maybe even in other parts of the world. And yet you haven't allowed that to get to you. You've made your mark. Now, on the flip of it, I think maybe I was reading one of your other interviews where you said this, and I understand that you also believe, and very rightly so, that sometimes we tend to see this notion of women's empowerment as something to do with rebellion. You know, you've got to go against your parents, you've got to go against, you know, culture, you've got to stand up against society. And I feel like as a result of that, feminism here has become so polarized. You know, on the one hand, we're seeing people who are obviously quote unquote in the traditional camp. I don't even know what that means anymore. But on the other hand, you know, it makes me so uncomfortable that social media is ablaze with just trying to get people to say, you know, modernity, whatever that also means, is the way forward. And you know, it's become like a male bashing minefield, and unless you're like a very visible rebel, you're not empowered. Which is why when you brought up that reference to the kind of community of women you saw growing up, that really made my heart sing, because I'm like, this is the way we can also imagine empowerment. You know, in our minds, it's this typical sense of how does the West look at a strong woman, and that's the only way to be strong. And I loved what you said in this interview about that's not necessarily the only way. Your own journey symbolizes this very delicate dance that you've performed, this balance, this moderate ground. How has that happened? How have you managed to kind of take both ends with you?
I think, I think it has to be love, love that I was given, and love that I have for my own family, my parents, my belief system, my religion, my faith, whatever. But it is grounded in love, and when things are grounded in love, I think you don't want to hate anyone to start with. So you don't have to be a feminist to hate men.
Yes.
I am a feminist. I am all up for women's rights. I do believe that sometimes in exceptional circumstances, one might have to stand up to their own family. But generally, just for every small little thing, not, I mean, for me, empowerment is a very simple thing. It's the freedom to choose. That's
Yeah.
it. For me, that's empowerment. So it's my choice whether I want to comment on something or not. It should be my choice whether I want to cover my head or not. It should be my choice whether I want to wear what I want. So that is for me empowerment. And when you take that choice, when we try to take that choice away from people, that for me is violence. And it happens from both ends. It happens from extremists where they want to cover women, or whether they want to tell women what to wear. But it's also happening in West, where they want to uncover women and they don't allow them to wear what they want to wear. So I mean, if we are all agreed on this definition, that we should let other people make a choice,
Yeah.
and that's their empowerment, I think things become easy. So for me, why I said that the women who were homemakers were very strong women, empowered women, because it was their choice to be a homemaker. It was their choice to not go out there and work, and they just followed what their heart wanted them to. It was not forced on them that you have to stay in the house and you have to look after the kids. It was what they really wanted to do. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's a different energy to these things when you are forced to do something and when you willingly do something. So I totally agree. I mean, and another thing that I keep trying to reflect in my own journey is sometimes when you are fighting something,
Yeah.
you start becoming like that. So
Yeah.
we have to be very, very careful while fighting for justice and while fighting for a cause, that whatever we fight, sometimes we become like that, because we think that in order to defeat that thing we have to be like them. So for example, a lot of women who do not have good, nice, caring male role models in their surroundings while they are growing up, and have been hurt by the opposite gender in whatever way, they start become very aggressive to all the males in their surroundings,
Yeah.
which might be, I mean, they have their own valid reason, but that might not be the most appropriate thing to do. I mean, it's better to heal oneself. So I mean,
Sure.
yeah, in that sense, it's very important, and it has come all this. If you see that kind of grounding in me,
Yeah.
it has to do a lot with my own inner struggle, while trying to be an empowered person, then trying to understand and redefine what empowerment is, then try to
Yeah.
see what my own value system is, then try to see where the world is going. So it's not something that, it's not a state where you will be for all the time. It keeps going and coming up, and we all have our struggles, and I struggle with it too. And I have some tough discussion with my parents at times, and my family at times,
Yeah.
and they have some tough things to say. But what we do with each other with these discussions is we allow each other to have our own choices and our own point of view. We give each other a very honest feedback, but then we let other person choose. And that's why I think there is no bitterness in that sense. We keep pushing each other's boundaries, but in a healthy and positive manner. But it has to
That's
happen like that. It has to happen like that.
yes, yes. And Sana, that sounds healthy and constructive as opposed to, kind of going down a rabbit hole with like anger. And anger is important, don't get me wrong, but
Yes,
but you're
yes.
so right. And amongst the plethora of things that I love, about you, this is what I said at the start, that, you don't shy away from sharing your own vulnerability, your own journey, and not trying to make it sound like, oh, my journey's been linear and pitch perfect, and here I am as a celebrity, like, and that's important because young women and girls listening into this, I mean, even older ones, we often don't talk enough about our own vulnerability. Today somebody will look at Sana Mir and say, oh, all the right boxes have been ticked. And which is why it's so heartening to hear you talk about how you have these honest conversations, and not every conversation is an uncomplicated one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I think that's the real action. That's the real courage in action, that you
yeah,
can talk about and let people like you or dislike you for who you are.
sure.
I mean, you don't have to put out an image. None of us. Sometimes I put makeup on, sometimes I just don't put makeup on, because I
Yeah,
should be comfortable in both ways. If I choose that I need to dress up, I will. But if I should be okay with how I look without it also. And that's also a message I would want to give to young women, because with Instagram and all the social media, it has its positive side, I agree, but it has its negative side as well, because we are all, young girls now are so conscious about their
yeah,
image, and
yeah,
that is not healthy, because anyone who's going to judge you by the way you look is
yeah,
not the right person for you. I mean,
sure.
so that is something we also need to talk with all these young, bright women who have
Yeah.
so much to give, and there's so much inside them that's more beautiful than just having a good-looking face. I would
Yes,
say.
yes, yes. No, Sana, I'm so glad you brought that up because this was exactly the question I wanted to cut. So this is a great segue into the next question because, the summit is about activating ambition among girls. It's about kind of interrogating a lot of these benchmarks and assumptions that we have when it comes to the ideal type. And if I'm not mistaken, some years ago, you called out and you spoke out about advertising campaigns that actually compel girls to become very self-conscious, by painting this very typical prototype portrait of that is the ideal body to have. And,
Yeah.
and I think maybe it was triggered by hair removal cream or whatever, but that doesn't even matter because that's one of many such marketing spiels that we'll see. And I mean, I think there was talk about how not enough sponsors and celebrities take a stand to support women kind of being comfortable in their own skin, which is very much the spirit of what you've just said. And, I want to bring up a couple of quotes that you said because they left such a mark on me. I think you said something like, during my 12 years as a sportswoman in Pakistan, I've rejected several offers to endorse beauty products just for this reason. I want young girls with a passion for sports to know that all they need for a practice session are the will to succeed, comfortable shoes and clothes, a water bottle, and a cap if it's hot. Make no mistake, you need strong arms, not smooth arms on a sports field. And Sana, that honestly gave me goosebumps. Like I read it a few times ahead of this interview, and I was just like, especially because we're at a time where everything is about, for celebrities in particular, but everything is about this candy floss PR campaigning. Everything's about a quick photo op, and that's very disturbing. And I feel like everything that you've said in this interview and everything that you embody on a daily basis is about pushing back against this, about not objectifying women and kind of saying you have enough other skills and stuff not to necessarily worry about having the perfect body, the perfect arms, and this is kind of what you were talking about earlier, but tell me, how do we get people to unlearn these very deeply ingrained stereotypes? And I'm so with you when you say this thing about Instagram. It's definitely got its advantages, as does the rest of social media. But I look at young girls today, and I have to say it's a little worrying, right? Like, because you feel, and I guess if I was at that stage in that part of my youth, I would probably have kind of jumped onto that bandwagon as well, because there's such a pressure. Where do we go from here, and how do we unlearn this?
Yeah, it is. It doesn't have a simple answer, and answers might be different for different people. But yeah, I mean, what I've always liked really things that make me angry. You said anger is important, and yes, it is. So one of the things that used to make me angry a young girl also was objectifying women. So I mean, I was respecting everyone's choice for what they want to do in showbiz and whatever other fields. But when it came into sport, I was I was triggered to say something, because
Sure.
I've seen young athletes. I've worked with them for 15 years. I've spent days and nights with them, months and years with them, and I realize how much doubt they already have in themselves. It takes years and years of giving confidence to a girl to build her confidence up, and then one or two doubts put into their mind, and it grows. It grows like a tree. So these are that was one ad that was putting that kind of doubt, because it showed a girl not wanting to be on a basketball court because she had some hair on her arm, and unless she removes that, she would not be comfortable to take the field. And I mean, that is a natural thing. Hair will grow on your
Yes.
body.
Yes.
It is very natural. So it should not stop you from taking the field. I mean, and a lot of these products, they are expensive for lower middle class and middle class people. So they cannot afford to meet that standard every month, every week. So we need to understand, while we are endorsing these products, that what kind of messaging are we doing, and what kind of standards we are setting for people. If all the energy is going to go into looking good, when is the athlete will put time to be good in what she or he can do? So that was my mindset behind that coming out for the young women who I thought might be watching that space, getting affected by it. As far as social media is concerned, it is very difficult. And recently, a few incidents happened in Pakistan when I was following those incidents, and they were very disturbing. So for the first time in my life, I tried to minimize my use of social media, and I put timers on my apps. I have never done that before, but it was one incident where I wanted to know what happened next and what was the development. And the more I read about it, the more my head was spinning.
Yeah.
So I just, at one point, I just thought that for my own sanity, it is very important that I just put a timer on my app. So I put timer on all my apps: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp even, because I was
Yeah.
trying to see how much time I was spending on the phone. I think that can be one way of letting people have a healthy habit of just monitoring their own time on social media, and trying to make young people understand that they need to have a balanced day. There should be time for physical activity, there should be time for learning, there should be time for social media, because the world is moving into a direction where they will need all this stuff. So there should be a time, but it should not be take most of their day or night. So
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be a balanced approach to that, I think, so we don't deprive them on this technology, but this technology doesn't become their whole life.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
if
Yes.
it's taking up the whole day, it might then take up your whole week, your whole month, and it will be. And there's a very nice book, because I'm not endorsing anything like that, but it's a
Sure.
really
No,
nice
of
book
course.
that I read, Atomic Habits. So
Hmm.
if people can go and read it, young people and old people or whoever, I think that it really talks about how we can um, keep making new habits and get rid of old habits. So it's all
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
making better choices.
Yeah, no, that sounds wonderful. That sounds like that's a definite recommendation that we should be looking out for. Sana, last couple of questions. I wanted to talk to you about, the role of conflict and failure and the emotions that are attached to being a sports celebrity, because that's obviously a part of, well, it's a part of everybody's life, but when you think about sports and when you think about leadership, both domains that you are very much a part of, um, it becomes very central. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the biggest, I don't know, like I'd hate to use this word challenges, but just sometimes we bump up against certain things, and especially as a woman. Yet it's not just for women, but as a female sports celebrity, let me ask you this. And when we think about failure, when we think about conflict, when we think about managing people as a leader, emotions are a big part of that. And yet women face like a lot of pushback to say, don't be over emotional about that, like don't be so sensitive about that. And there's this stereotype that gets attached.
Hmm.
How have you dealt with this dyad between dealing with failure and dealing with emotions and kind of conflict in the mix?
I think I've been actually now very grateful to my failures, because one of the most important lessons in life is humility.
Yeah.
And when you are a public figure, and if you become a bit successful,
Yeah.
that is the main thing that will keep you going. And if you do not face challenges, if you do not face friction, if you do not face failures, it's very difficult to inculcate humility in yourself. And I think what we talk about learning and unlearning, all of us need to unlearn every time. I mean, till the day we die, we will be learning. So I think failures have a very, very important role in anyone's life. And my one of my spiritual teachers, Shabano, she used to tell me about how we can see failures with curiosity, rather
Mm.
than have self pity or blame or make an excuse. Just look at it with curiosity, and try to find out what this failure is trying to teach me. And the moment we learn that lesson, though, that kind of test goes away. Sometimes, I mean, there are exceptional circumstances where people are tested for very long times. I don't want to sound insensitive to that, but mostly when you have learned your lesson, and you just don't blame other people, you look within yourself, what is this teaching me? mostly you can cross that difficulty. And I think I've been very grateful to my setbacks, to my failures. They have taught me a lot of things. And emotions, as you say, anger and love and whatever emotion, being depressed, feeling
Yes.
grief, all these emotions are very important, and that makes you human. And one of the biggest strengths I had as a cricket player was to know my own limitations. I was not a very talented, gifted player in that sense, skill wise. I worked hard to get whatever skill I had, but my implementation was better. All the coaches used to say to other players that you are more talented than Sana, but she's uh, making the best out of her ability. And the core thing was that I was able to know my own limitations. So I was true to what I knew that I couldn't do or I need to do better.
Yeah.
And in life also, I mean, these failures, these setbacks, they come to you to teach you something. And if you are honest with yourself and try to detach yourself for that particular moment and see what they're there to teach you, most probably you will fall in love with your failures as well, as much as you want to achieve success. So I think it's a very both these things are extremely important. Failures and success, and all the people, all the athletes, whether it's Djokovic, who's ruling tennis at the moment, or Federer or Nadal, all these people had their time with failures, and
Yeah.
that's why they are who they are today. So I mean, we should not expect our journeys to be comfortable and easy. It is going to be difficult, and we just need to inculcate a temperament. We need to develop ourselves in a way that we can fight back and just show up every day. That's what
Yeah.
sports teaches you. Just show up the next day and do your best.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. And there'll be so many girls and other people listening, and I just feel like that message is so important because we often, like I was saying, we often see a very glorious journey and personality, and you feel like that looks wonderful and unachievable. And then you realize that actually it's been pretty complex, and it's had its sort of a
Yeah.
very mercurial sort of graph. It's not as if it was totally in one trajectory. Sana, what maybe not your favorite question, but what prompted the retirement decision, and what is current and next for Sana Mir?
Yeah. So I guess the retirement had to come because I couldn't, my vision for myself and the team was not matching with the vision of the management of that time.
Yeah.
And there was, I mean, I'm all up for friction, and I'm all up for conflict in the sense when it helps you grow. But
Yeah.
when it comes to a point when it just there's a dead end and you cannot see much beyond that, or your vision. I mean, I don't say that someone else's vision is wrong and my vision is right, but when there is too much diversion of visions, then there is no point where you can, I mean, when you know that you cannot work together. So that was the main thing. My vision for the team and myself was quite different to what we were going into with. So yeah, so then I decided that it's better for me to leave rather than be in the team and create friction, rather than let them at least try to implement their vision smoothly.
Mhm.
So that was the main reason. And your next question was about what's next for Sana. I don't know. And that's I don't plan my life too much, but I
Yeah.
was really blessed to get a lot of commentary work in the last
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah.
So I've done the men's PSL, I've done the national T20s, I've done the Pakistan, Zimbabwe. So I've been a lot of doing a lot of commentary work. Now I'm doing a sports show on national television in Pakistan. And then the World Cup, I will be covering the World Cup with the national television PTV. And I've done some motivational talks. I've done some talks around in Pakistan. Whenever I'm free, I do that. And There's another thing that I love, and I'm also doing on the side, is mentorship. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
so I've done sessions with the Hong Kong women's team, with the Scotland's women's team, and sometimes I just do pro bono sessions for girls around me. So yeah, I mean, that's something I really think that has played a major role, because my parents were my mentors. Then I had Shabano, then Shazre, and a lot of other people
Yeah.
who held my hand when I wanted guidance. So I just want to be there for people, and help the mental side of things for athletes, because for athletes it's a huge pressure. All your mistakes are public.
Yes.
For people who hold office, their mistakes can be seen by 5 people, 10 people,
Yes.
20, 50, that's it. But when you're a public figure, you drop a catch and the whole world sees that.
All
And then
over. Yes.
so I mean, it's a very small mistake you make, but there's not much room for error. So there's huge pressure on athletes. So yeah, so just to be there to let them understand how to handle pressure and stress, I think that's something I really want to do in future.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely, that's so important. And I feel like in a second, everything's like viral now, and the dangers of that and kind of just dealing with that cognitively is just so important, especially, I guess, at any age, but especially as a young girl growing up. And that's
Yeah.
really beautiful. Sana, in our last segment, I've just got a few questions which are like quick responses, I
Ah.
suppose. No, they're not tough. I promise they're not tough at all. But and feel free not to answer if there's something that you feel you can't, you don't want to immediately respond to.
Okay.
But tell me this, Sana. Like we were talking about this before we got onto this session, that you've lived life out of a suitcase for the longest time. And when you were on all of these tours, when you've traveled all of this while, what was the one thing that you would miss the most when you were away for a game?
A meal cooked by my mother.
Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
home cooked food was I'm a Kashmiri by origin. I love my food. So
Oh,
I think
brilliant.
home cooked meal was the biggest thing that I used to miss.
Yeah. Sana, one myth about sports women that you feel, and I feel particularly in South Asia, but something that people believe which you think is completely or fairly inaccurate.
That if you're going to lift weights, you are going to become this bulky, big man. It's not
Right.
like that. If you lift weights, your body would look even better.
I love that. Yeah, 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 yeah. Is there any kind of and maybe you did, but is there any kind of a pre-match ritual that you had? Like, I'm not saying something superstitious, but just something that kind of was a ritual you would do before starting a match?
Yeah, I would listen to music.
Mm.
A lot of mostly Sufi music, but music
Yeah,
would definitely inspire me.
beautiful. Wow, yeah. Does Sana have a favorite book? I know you mentioned one to us, but is there one book that you feel like is very, very central to yourself?
Um, it's very difficult to say one book.
Yeah, yeah.
I keep changing. I mean, keep reading different books. At the moment, I really like the Atomic Habits. I think
Yeah,
it's a very useful book.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'm also reading Masnavi by the Maulana, but Maulana Rumi,
Yeah.
I can't say that I have read that or I fully understand that. So I'm just trying to learn that. So I find it very beautiful. It has really nice
Yeah,
messages. So yeah, I mean, at the moment, these two are the ones I'm reading.
yeah, yeah. So now, we talk about fitness, and again, like we've spoken about not going down this dangerous route, but is there any kind of a fitness secret, a tip, something that you feel was important to your or is important to your journey?
I think one thing in fitness that I would really say that has really helped me has been stretching and yoga.
Yeah,
Whenever we talk about fitness, we think about a lot of cardio session, hit sessions, weight training. They have their own place. But what really has helped me deal with injuries, prolong my career, all that stuff has been yoga and stretching, because
Wow.
that has really helped me calm my mind also, and give a bit of a rest to my body also. So that's something I really enjoy, and I think that has really helped me prolong my career.
Yeah. Your favorite memory associated with your cricketing journey? I know,
Uh,
again, very hard, right? It's like saying
very
one out
difficult.
of a,
Yeah, very
yeah,
difficult. This one, it has to be the gold medals, the wins against India in World Cups, the win against England in England.
yeah.
My 8 of my players making it to the top 20 ICC ranking, playing at Lords in World 11. So yeah, these things, and then getting named
Wow.
the captain of the decade by Wisden. So yeah, I mean these things are very close to my heart.
Last question, Sana. If you were not a cricketer, what would you have been?
I would be very sad.
First of all, yes, let's just
First
say
of all,
that. And the
first of
nation
all, I
would be
would
very sad too.
yeah. First of all, I would be very sad. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Really don't know. I went into engineering and I left engineering for cricket.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really don't know. I'm glad I don't know. I don't know that, and
Yes,
I
yes. I
got
was
to
just going
be.
to say that says something really big, right? The fact that
Yeah.
you don't know. Yeah. Well, Sana, what a pleasure this has been. I mean, it's just I'm so grateful to you for your time and the fact that this conversation has felt so real and so honest, like I'm saying, and you're a flag bearer for the sort of feminism that should be propelled the world over. And thank you for doing this. Thank you for making time out of a very hectic, upcoming schedule. And I just, I'm taking this energy from our conversation, which I know now will take me through the weekend and much longer. But thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything final that you want to add, but this has been a really, really poignant and powerful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabah, for having me. And it's always a pleasure talking to you. And you also did a lot of homework and asked the right questions. And that's why this conversation was useful for you also. So thank you so much for giving me the space and for the invite. And hopefully, with this energy, the mutual energy, I'll also be needing it, because I also need to get over the hectic weekend. But thank you,
Yeah.
and all the best to all the viewers who will be watching this and who are watching this. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you so much and good luck with the upcoming T20 conversations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.